Hello and welcome to Piwik PRO YouTube video series. Topic of the video, quick guide, how to use Piwik PRO Tag Manager's debug mode. So what we're gonna learn? We're gonna start with a short introduction to explain what is debug mode and what it is used for. Then we'll show the key features of the debug mode while also explaining how to use them in an effective way. So let's dive in. What is debug mode in Tag Manager? So let's take a quick and very short step back. What is Tag Manager? Tag Manager is a module in Piwik PRO platform that lets you add scripts to your website without the need of editing the website. And this is mainly used to enhance the possibilities, tracking more data to feed the data in the analytics reports, or perhaps to enhance the possibilities of customer data platform. We may also use Tag Manager to add third-party scripts to our website. In any case, there's a chance that things might not work as they should in a very first go, and to detect and assist in fixing them, we will use debug mode. So let's take a closer look at debug mode, some of its features, and how to use them. So how do we activate debug mode? First of all, you need to go to Tag Manager, and on those top tabs, you will notice debug mode. You go there, and then in here, you'll see more or less what I'm seeing. A URL on which you're gonna open the debug mode, and a button which, upon a click, will open the debug mode. But before we do that, just want to let you know that the URL that you're gonna see here depends on what you're gonna add on their administration tab. So if you go to the administration tab, if you have the access to administration tab, if you go there and find your property, whatever the sites and app addresses you're gonna add here, the URLs, they will be added in here. So you're gonna be able to, if you have more than one domain that you track or more subdomains, you'll be able to see the list here and then choose appropriate one and then hit connect and then open the debug mode on that very domain or subdomain. Moreover, this is the website that I'm using for the debug mode presentation today. But if I were to open the debug mode on any particular page, say this one, I could paste it under here and hit connect, and not only will it open on that very page, it will remember that throughout the session that you're working with the debug mode, and later you'll be able to connect and reconnect on that very page, which is useful to know. Having said all that, I'm just gonna connect on a main page. So I'm gonna hit connect, which notice open my website, having this little pop-up on the site. We can see here that it is connected, meaning all the tags, triggers, variables are up to date at the moment when I clicked on it. In here, we see debug mode, tags, events. We'll get back to that. But first, let's take a closer look in here. I can click disconnect, which brings me back to the debug mode, and then I can start new connection. You would do that when you change something in tags, triggers, or variables, and you want to restart with the new version of tags, triggers, and or variable. But let's start over. Let's reconnect the debug mode. So I'm gonna hit connect again. We are now connected. Let's go back to the Tag Manager. Let's go through the tags tab first. What we see here is the list of all of our tags. What is good about this section is that we can see them by default sorted by times they were fired, and we can see this one was fired one time, this one was fired one time, and if I scroll down, at some point I'll see those that were not fired because they didn't meet the conditions or we didn't get the consent for whatever reasons. We can change it to be sorted by priority. Priority refers to the setting under tag priority. Then we have by name. We can see them in alphabetical order. We can also use search. So if I were to find my tag called something that I know related to login. So I typed in login and I can see that the login is in the name of the tag. What is great about the search is that you can lock yourself on a particular tag and focus only on the tag that you are interested in. So now it's a login, but I could change it to blog, and I see only the tags that are related to blog. And I can change the search. I can go to events and then say, lock myself only on a page view event. So if I were to refresh, I see we have more page view events in here. We'll get back to the events. First, let's go back here and finish up on the search. So you can lock yourself on any particular tag, click on it, see its details, and go to triggers, and then go to website and switch between website, tag, events, where you can also use search. If you click here on the particular events, you can lock on a particular variable, again, related to blog, so blog category, for example, and that's how you can sort of switch between tags related to blogs, events related to blog, like page view events, variables related to blog. Search might be very useful for debugging. Now, let's take a closer look at the information that we have here for each individual tag. There are three things here. First, we see the title. That should be straightforward. So if we were to sort this list by the name, it will be sorted by the title at the top. Then, because we have it sorted by times fired, we see the top tag to be the tag that was fired the most, so 3 times. Here we have 2 times, 1 times. If we scroll long enough, we'll see the tags that were not fired. Another thing here is that we have this analytics in a checkbox. This information is related to consent types. What do I mean by that? Because on this website, I've given all the consents for all different types of data usage. If I was to revoke the consent, so if I were to go to privacy policy page and then click on this button and say revoke the A/B testing and then save choices, analytics will remain the same. If I were to scroll long enough, I will get to the tag that requires A/B testing. This one will not fire, despite the fact that trigger conditions might be met. A/B testing tag will not fire because this is the very first check that we do, presuming that we are using consent banner on our website and our consents are linked to the tag. Now, the setting that I'm referring to is that each and every tag, I'm under tags tab, each and every tag has this setting consent type, and it can be either analytics, A/B testing, conversion tracking, and so on, or some of them may not require consent because, let's say, we want them to be fired and they are not related to any sort of privacy issues. So we can set the no consent is required. So those are related to this information in here. Now, let's move on to the individual tags view. So if I were to click on any of these tags, on the right-hand side, I'll be able to see details of any tag that I clicked on. So I clicked on this tag. So this is where the title shows me which one is clicked for when I sort of kind of get lost in here. I can then always find it in the search. On the right-hand side, here we have some information. So first one is respect, opt-out, and D&D. By default, this section is on for each and every tag whenever we are adding the tag. Leave it as it is if you want to basically respect visitors who turn on the do not track feature in their browser. But in any case, in here we can see whether it is enabled or disabled. Next is don't fire in debug mode. And currently this one is disabled. Then we can see the tags code. So whether we using in our tags custom code or any sort of template like gold template, under tag settings in debug mode, we will still be able to see the actual JavaScript that will be added or is being added whenever the tag fires. So we can always see what is happening in the background. Next, we see triggers. Now, a lot of the tags will have only one trigger. This tag in particular has 3 triggers. We can click on a trigger and see what sort of trigger that is. So this one is being triggered on the event called STG page view. We'll get to events in just a moment. But right now, all it matters that this one is STG page view, so that's a page view trigger. And then the condition page URL does not contain blog, right? If I were to click on this one, I see that this one fires on debug's history and page URL does not contain blog. Third one is being fired on page view and page URL ends with blog. Now, how do I know which of the triggers fired a tag? Because it's quite straightforward when we see that the tag fired once and there's only one trigger in this section. But if we see that the tag was fired 3 times, we can't really see that information here. However, if we move on slightly to this setting, fired on events, we can see that it got fired 3 times on those events. So number 3, event number 3, event number 16, and event number 22. For a second, I'm just going to go to the events. You can see that they are all numbered and they're being numbered from the moment when we enter the debug mode. So the very first is here, second here, third one here, fourth here, and so on and so on. And in between, we can see the different page views, right? So they're being even divided by the pages. Going back to this tag, if I want to know which trigger fired on any of these events, I'm just going to click on this one and I can see that on the event number 3, this very first trigger fired that very tag. If I'm going to come back and I'm going to click on 16th, I can see that the second fired the tag, and I can see that it was the debounce history event. If I'm going to come back to say 22, I can see that again, the second trigger fired the tag. And that's how we can check which triggers fired the tag. And as I mentioned, towards the bottom, we can see what sort of event triggered the tag. So I already mentioned that. Finally, flight date. Some tags might be set to, if I were to go to a tag, each tag has the setting flight dates, where we can fire a tag not only based on the triggers, but also for specific date ranges and specific times of the day in a set time zone, whatever the time zone we have here. And if that tag fires are any of the particular dates or times, we will see that information in here as well. Finally, let's talk about the event tab. I will reconnect the debug mode in a moment to restart the events count. In the events tab, we will see all events that Tag Manager detects. But I would like to make a side note first. When we install Piwik Pro on our website, we're adding the installation container into our website. So under administration tab here, if you go to particular property under installation, there is an installation code. This installation code is the code that has to go right after the opening body tag on every page on our site. Now, the reason I'm saying that is that every time when the page loads, container initiates a data layer object within the browser window global scope, to be more specific. As a result, all detected by the Tag Manager events are stored there in a structured manner. We can also send some events to this data layer too and take the advantage of them using Tag Manager. Quite often it is being done for the e-commerce website for e-commerce event. Now going back to Tag Manager events tab in the debug mode, let's connect. We can see those events in a data layer object. We could take a look at it in the console of the browser, but we can see it also here. However, while using the browser, data layer would have to be refreshed every time the new event took place. So using debug mode, not only do we see them all in order, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So let's take a look how it looks in the console. So that's pretty much the same. So we have number 0, 1, 2, which is a page view, 3, which is a DOM ready. And we can see same page view, DOM ready, page load, audience fetched, etc. So while we using the browser, data layer would have to be refreshed every time when the new event took place. So using debug mode, not only do we not have to say refresh that list, we have them all in here and even between the page views. So if I were to initiate another page view, notice that the console is being sort of purged, but as we continue the events, we have the breakdown between the pages, so we can look at them in different pages. If I were to go to loans page, we'll notice that the loans page was recorded as well. Another thing with the events is that they are nicely structured. So we have not only numbers, but we can also see that there are green colors next to some events. This is normally when some sort of tag fired on a particular event. So if I were to go to this one and go to tags, I can see that the number of tags were fired on this particular event. We can also see their names. Some of them were not fired, and we can also see that. We can also see consent type for each particular tag. We can also see consent status and priority. Another thing that we can do, every time when the tag fires, for example on DOM ready, we can see that this test tag fired, and we can see here that there is some sort of variable here. Now, we don't see the value of that very variable, but we can go back and go to variable and check what was the value in here, right? We can see that the value was undefined, so we were not able to send anything with this particular page. That's because that was not the very first page view, and we would normally have that value if the visitor comes from the external website, but that's just the specificity of this particular variable. Another thing that we can see here, we can also go check the data layer. Now, data layer in case of this one is the STG DOM ready, which is basically what we see here. For e-commerce websites, we can also see the data layer events. So let's switch to e-commerce website. Now on the e-commerce website, let's initiate debug mode. So we are now connected. Let's initiate some sort of interactions that will cause the data layer event to be pushed into data layer. So if I were to add to cart and add to cart again, that should push the event into debug mode. So we can see add to cart and add to cart. If I click on any of these events, I can see the actual structure of that event. So we can see add to cart, we can see that it's an e-commerce event, we can see the currency, products, details, name, category, price, and so on. As a last thing before we wrap up, I want to show you quickly how you would normally go over the process of debugging a tag. So here I'm looking at a custom event tag, which uses a template. So you have category, CTA, which is a static value, click as an action, which is, again, click is a static value. As a name, we have a variable, in fact, custom variable that we've added here. And it's a JavaScript that captures the button's name. This button's name is get your estimate here. And moving further, consent type is analytics, nothing unusual with the settings here. Let's take a closer look at the trigger. So trigger is click class contain Jumbotron BTN, and it's a click trigger. We know that from here, but also because it refers to click class. Now in debug mode, let's look on the tag that we're looking for. So let's move on to tags. Let's add the name. So I'm just gonna copy it from here. So now I'm on the tag, I can click on it. We can see it hasn't been fired yet. In here, we can see the settings of that tag that we could have seen also here and in here and in here. We can see the actual script rather than a template. We can see that we are using variable. We can see the trigger. If we click on the trigger, we can see that it's a click trigger and that the conditions are just as we looked at in the tag. It hasn't got fired, so we don't see any events here. But let's go back here and let's click on this button. That should trigger the tag. Let's check this tag's class. We can see Jumbotron BTN, so it should fire the tag, right? So let's go back to debug mode. Hasn't been fired, so we need to click on it. We clicked on it and it got fired once. We can see on the event 29, we can see 29 here, so we can go either into 29th event or go back to the tag and click on the event from here. So we can do it both ways. We can see that the triggers were fired, the trigger conditions were met, and that's because first it was a click event, two, the click event click class contained Jumbotron BTN, which makes sense. Now, another thing that I would be interested in, I still don't see here how the value click text was captured, whether it was captured properly, because the tag, if we were to go back here, the button's name was get your estimate here. So how do I find out if that value was captured properly? I'm going to copy this name and I'm going to hit back in here to go back to 29 STG click, and I'm going to switch to variables tab, and I'm going to enter this value click text. And now I can see my variable that I used for this tag, so it's this one, right? So it's correct, and we can see the value get your estimate here, which was captured properly. And that's how you use debug mode in Piwik PRO's Tag Manager.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking it and subscribing to our channel. Check the description below to find some useful links like free Piwik PRO sign up page, community forum page, and links to related videos. Until next time.